voice over
IP.
What's IP?
Internet protocol.
Protocol.
Yeah. PLU.
Did you start already?
Yeah,
Oh.
but just
Okay.
dialing in,
Actually, that's probably.
PLU is really.
That's probably how we should do it.
Keeping their like normal hands. I don't know what you call it, like telephonic.
Handsets or
instead of VoIP ones. It's been like eventually they're gonna have to go away, and nobody wants it to, or at least nobody in the.
None of the techie people.
None of the. What do you call them? What do you call it? The phone people.
No.
Company?
Telephony? No, the guys who work there.
Yeah, sure. Telephony.
Yeah, those people don't want to go away.
I wonder. I wonder if it's like a whole separate skill set. Like if
It's hard. Yeah.
as
because of
things
the-
migrate to internet protocol, whether like your telephony experience is just worthless or obsolete.
Well, it's like all new hardware and different software too. It's like there's software for the current system, but it mean learning something new.
Right. Oh, that was a good one. I could do that one every time. Do you have any designs on the evening?
I mean, you've got your notes. That seems to
I
be.
have some notes.
We're going to have to eventually do a China episode, I'm sure. But that could happen anytime.
We talked about drummers or singers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. China episode. Ooh, how do we get into that? Okay, here's a funny one that I just thought would be a funny question.
Okay.
Katie was sent to the store for nitrate-free bacon,
Oh,
and I just wanted to talk about nitrate-free bacon. What's a nitrate?
well, NO2, I mean, it's just a chemical they use as a preservative. And so it's it's naturally occurring in very small amounts, but industrial meat production went, we can use this whenever we cure meat, and it'll prevent botulism, I think.
It's pretty just standard practice,
Yeah.
or has been for a while.
It's a very easy to make chemical, and it's reasonably non-toxic, and so you can throw it into preserved meats. And
But then
Yeah.
some people aren't happy that it's in their food
Yeah.
these days.
yeah, like my pigs, they don't use nitrates in their cure. They just use sea salt and honey, which is all you need. But then it kind of shortens the window of how long it can be out of the freezer.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sea
It's
salt
also a
and honey.
major, fertilizer. Like the main fertilizer we use industrially is ammonium nitrate.
Hey, this is Fritz Haber or whatever, right?
Yeah, that's the Fritz Haber. Yeah, his process was the first time they fixed nitrogen out of the atmosphere. The limiting nutrient in most soils is nitrogen, because nitrogen is a vital component of proteins in plants, and so if you want to kind of supercharge your soil, juice it, give it steroids, basically, throw in some ammonium nitrate, and then you can grow a lot of corn or whatever. And it was right before World War I that a German Jewish scientist named Fritz Haber first made the industrial process of converting nitrogen gas, which is incredibly unreactive. It's about the least reactive thing we have.
Does that make it hard to grab?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't grab it with anything if it doesn't want to be friends with
Yeah,
anything.
yeah. It doesn't. It's so unreactive. They use it to preserve old documents, nitrogen gas.
Well, yeah, and also fill potato chip bags with it and stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Or
they
trucks or
were
warehouses. Or I think someone was telling me most apples you get at the grocery store
yeah.
are a year old at
Yeah,
least.
yeah.
I've just
be
been
surprised.
hanging out in a warehouse pumped full of nitrogen.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's nuts.
Right, because if it's all nitrogen, there's no oxygen, so there's no oxidation
Right,
going on.
so-
Oxygen is extremely reactive.
Right.
That's why we breathe it. So So yeah, in like 1910 or 1911, because nitrate is also the main component in explosives and gunpowder.
Right.
So Germany does not have. Germany has historically kind of poor soils, kind of sandy soils, and they don't have any nitrate deposits of their own. And the main nitrate deposits were like guano in Chile.
Another thing people use to make explosives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, bat guano.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bat guano or bird guano. Bird guano is the bird guano is coming from the ocean fundamentally. Bat guano is coming from the land. So there's a hell of a lot more bird guano. There are these huge there are mountains of cooked bird shit, and
it's just an explosive person would just see it and think, "Ooh, look at all that nitrate."
That's what it was. I mean, they fortunes were built. And geopolitics mattered. So if Germany had started anything before they could fix their own nitrogen, there was a navy in the world called the British Navy that would have cut them off, and they would have run out. Their crops would have stopped growing, and they would have run out of explosives in about a year.
Right. Two things that are pretty necessary to fight a wage war with is some food and ammunition.
Yeah, Germany has plenty of coal. You know, they had enough energy, but it doesn't matter if you don't have enough explosives or fertilizers. So they started fixing their own nitrogen, and they can suddenly fight World War I.
Huh. That was a big, in the in these sort of historical paradigms where people look at like actually significant moments or events. Nitrogen fixing, or technologies, even nitrogen fixing seems pretty up there.
You could
the stirrup and the. Wasn't that what was the name of that book? This gunpowder in the stirrup or something.
Oh yeah, probably. I mean,
think someone. Yeah.
It's as important. It's the nitrogen fixation is as important, arguably, as electricity, as the invention of fire. Like what it did, and for good and bad. So what it did was it lifted the ecological lid on human societies.
Right.
And so all the fixed nitrogen in the world, let's say that's quantity X, that existed right before humans did it. Right?
Like in the soil already.
Yes, in the soil,
basically.
in the ocean.
Okay.
This is the nitrogen.
When you say fixed, you mean it's bonded to something?
Yeah.
So
it's no longer nitrogen gas, it's nitrate or ammonia. So it goes from being...
Or ammonium. It's fixed to ammonia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So nitrogen gas is N2. It's incredibly unreactive.
And it's
ammonia is NH3, and it's incredibly reactive. It's so reactive you can use it as a cleaner. You can use it to bleach things.
That's ammonia. It's just nitrogen and some hydrogen.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Whoa, cool.
Yeah.
Well, now I know what ammonia is.
Yeah,
that's
and
great.
You give it you give it an extra hydrogen, and then it's ammonium. And that's even more reactive. And so now it's a positive. NO2 is a minus, so ammonium nitrate. All these big bombs,
okay.
Timothy Leary, the Oklahoma City bombing, it was ammonium nitrate. That's how reactive it is. You can pile it up together and put a little explosive next to it, and it will explode.
Right, hence the fertilizer.
It's a fertilizer
stuff.
bomb.
Yeah. You're right, fertilizer bomb.
Some of the worst industrial accidents that have ever happened usually involve ammonium nitrate being stored somewhere, and the stories are incredible. Like there was a ship full of ammonium nitrate. I think it was right after either World War I or II. Some idiot had packed it full of ammonium nitrate. They were going to use it for explosives, but then the war ended, and so they were shipping it back across the Atlantic, and it was up in Canada, like Halifax or something, and the ship caught fire. And it exploded in the harbor, and it knocked a plane out of the sky. It killed 300, 400 people. It leveled the town. It was a massive fertilizer bomb. There was another one it was 1918. It was a big silo of it in Germany. It exploded and killed a ton of people.
Jeez.
It's a bomb.
Gotcha.
It's easy to make. It's so reactive. It's autocatalytic. I don't know what. I couldn't draw out the reaction, but presumably I'm looking at your NH4
is this
NO2.
right?
Yeah.
So this is what you're referring to when you say ammonium nitrate.
NH4 NO2, yeah.
Gotcha.
So it auto catalyzes to something. Probably H2O and something else. looking at it, but I mean, it's clearly there. So,
Right.
okay. So all the nitrogen from the atmosphere that had ever been fixed by natural processes. This is legumes. This is some bacteria in the soil, and even lightning. Lightning fixes a little bit of nitrogen, which is because it jumps through the electron shells when it goes through the air.
Okay.
And it's jumping through nitrogen shells and cracking them open, and some of it's combining with oxygen.
And they've got oxygen around it.
Yeah.
You're right.
Right. So all of that for 3.5 billion years gave us, in the year, let's say 1910, quantity X.
Right.
Right.
This much.
That is the biosphere. And that is like the limiting nutrient in the whole biosphere. Oceans, land. In less than 100 years, humans have made that quantity 2X.
Right.
It took 3.5 billion to get to X. It took less than 100 to get to 2X. It's a huge change.
One of those things that gave us the means to live outside our means, like petroleum.
Right. Before nitrogen fixation, we were starving to death with quantity X at 2 billion people. Now we're 7 billion people because of fertilizer and oil. So when they talk about trying to live in balance with the biosphere, you're not talking about anything until you talk about under 2 billion people. You can't stabilize it at a higher level than that.
Had it stabilized?
We were hungry.
So we were being limited. We were hitting the ceiling.
We hit the ceiling, basically. Yeah. Because
we didn't give the stabilizing mechanism time to work because we figured out nitrate
exactly
fixing.
We temporarily kicked the lid off of one ecological limit, and now we're hitting others, of course. But we were going hungry. Look, fortunes were being made, and huge quantities of that guano from Chile, the saltpeter, they were being mined and shipped all over the world because it was incredibly important to have it. Like, oh, I want to grow wheat on this field. I can't until in Montana. I can't until I get this shipment of fertilizer from South America. Right. That's how they were. This little tiny area in Peru and Chile and stuff were geopolitically vital because of how limiting, agriculture was.
Wow.
The only other way to do it is to be like the Chinese and the East Asians, where you recycle absolutely everything. You compost everything. Everything goes back into the soil.
That keeps your nitrate.
Yeah, that's what you're recycling mostly. And your phosphorus and your potassium, But they were, in the Farmers of 40 Centuries book, they're not just composting their poo and all of their animals' poo and not having any food waste to speak of. They are composting their shirts when they wear out. They are composting, like if a wild dog poops in the street, they pick it up and compost it.
And I mean, theoretically, if you can do that 100%, nothing is being expended.
Yeah.
You're not losing any resource.
Yeah. Right.
It's just
it's a closed cycle.
Right. That's
the open part of it is this: every year you get a growing season, and in that growing season, sun and water. A plant uses sun and water to catch all that nitrate again.
Out of the air.
Yep. And then no, out of the soil.
Oh, right, out of the soil.
But if it's a legume, out of the air a little bit.
Okay, so the legumes can
fix nitrogen.
Okay. But
that's why they use them in crop rotation.
I see.
Grow a bunch of soybeans.
Anything else is expending
it's extracting it out
of the soil. To build itself.
Yes. So that's why.
And then the way you get it back is compost.
Yeah, composting.
Gotcha.
Basically, decay. The cycles of decay.
How about the stuff you eat? Do you compost all your human waste too?
Absolutely, you do. They did.
Gotcha.
They did it for well over 40 centuries.
Right.
You have to.
Otherwise, you're losing those resources.
Yeah. And the thing to think, this is not just some poor, wretched farmer on the lowest plateau who is also doing that. Mm-hmm. This is at the city of Shanghai in the year also 1910, roughly. Consortia of farmers are getting together, pooling their money, and making and bidding against other groups of farmer for the city's poop.
Right.
There's no sewer system. It's too valuable.
In the same way people were jockeying for access to Chilean guano or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. They drew their own water. They didn't need that guano. They used it when it came around.
Sure.
But they had supported this highly advanced civilization because of that recycling mechanism for 40 centuries without a frontier. They did it all in place, and they did it by that intense recycling. It's incredible. I used to be gung-ho about recycling and composting and stuff when I was doing community gardens. I read that book, and it was like, wow, here's 200 million people who are far better at composting than anything I could dream of.
Right, and for them, it's not a pet love. It's the normal.
It's normal, and it's
how
vital.
you live and how you eat.
Yeah,
it's not a cause.
Right.
Like for you, it was a cause.
For me, it was a choice.
Right. Exactly.
They composted. They obsessed more about composting than Americans obsess about their cars.
Right.
It was an absolutely vital part. So for the city of Shanghai, not only do they not have to pay the expense of running a sewer system, which would also pollute the river.
Right.
They made money off of their own poo. That's how there was a market for it.
That's
they
awesome.
This other group of 40 farmers who was bidding too low is like, God damn it. They outbid us. They were able to pay more for this shit, and we don't get any of this shit.
I just got a flash of insight into something I read a long time ago and never totally understood. But in Les Miserables, in the edition I had, there's 2 appendices in the back. One was on argot, thieves speak, basically.
Yeah.
That was sort of an essay on poverty. I mean, the whole novel is. But anyway, but looking at poverty and like the lower classes through argot, this language or pidgin or whatever it would be considered. And then the other one was an essay about the Parisian sewer system.
Yeah.
And like, I don't remember much about it, but he used this imagery of like flushing gold, down the toilet.
Yep.
And how, so you just sparked a flash of remembrance, because I remember reading the essay, but I didn't. That now it makes more sense. Imagining the folks in Shanghai bidding on the sewage.
Yeah, and it was flushing gold. I worked in our wastewater plant. We have the TAGRO program, so we're much better than average.
Right.
But, as we don't look something like, I think. So how industrially today, how do we fix nitrogen? Well, natural gas. I think natural gas is both it's the source of hydrogen. You need hydrogen source, and you need energy. And something like 5 to 10% of all the natural gas used in the entire world goes into making fertilizer.
Wow.
So you reach peak natural gas and peak focil fuels, and
then
all
you're
of a sudden,
also at peak nitrate.
Yep, and you're all of a sudden looking at
you're peak humans.
Yeah, you're. Oh, look, we kicked the lid off this ecological limit. Sorry, folks, nature always bats last. You don't permanently ever. That's not a thing, like.
Oh yeah, that's so funny.
So the world is going to look at this situation of like, oh shit.
It's like that story about meeting death on the road somewhere or something. The guy, I can't remember. It's like Death in Samsara or something.
Oh yeah.
But it's the name of a place. But the guy tries to cheat death, and so he flees the city and then runs into death in the city he fled to, and he was like, "Yeah, I thought it was kind of weird. I ran into you yesterday." But it's like this inevitability.
Yeah.
But then the guy's reaction to that, anyway.
Sure.
We're cheating this
for a little bit.
We're running with this thing that's sort of tied with a cord to our ankle. Eventually.
Yep. Yeah.
You can't get away from it.
Right. Well, yeah, it's like the ball and chain. You picked up the ball and ran with it for a while, but it's getting heavier. Like you would be far smarter to just drag it behind.
Right.
That's what wisdom is. That's why China is still a free people, And these things matter. Like they were in the Qing dynasty, it might have been 400 million people during the High Qing. I mean,
wow.
Are there any other countries?
That's a lot of folks.
That's
If
in the year
if we were
1700.
at 2 billion just before,
Yeah.
that's a lot of folks.
That's a lot of people in the year 1700 under one government, a strong central government, and it's actually doing its stuff. Well,
Did you say
what's the 400 million?
million?
Yeah, that's more than the United States today. Huh? So, yeah, the practices of that average Chinese farmer, like they didn't do it in order to satisfy people talking about them 300 years later.
Right.
But they did it working that hard, that is how they bought their freedom and their greatness. You know, the book that Farmers of 40 Centuries, he made the point that they're in this subtropical location. They're on the Yangtze River, you know, and he said there aren't any flies. It's the damnedest thing. Because he was an American king and H.M. King, and
he wrote this like mid 20th century or early.
No, early 20th century.
Early
He was a
20th
soil
century,
scientist from like the University of Wisconsin or Minnesota or something, and it blew him away. He was like, we didn't even know what we were missing until somebody pointed it out. Well, why are there no flies? Because humans had taken away their food. There's nothing to decay. They outcompeted them.
Wow.
Yeah, and they are. It's
You don't get to eat this.
There's no shit in the streets because the farmers are stealing it all. There's no dead animals because the farmers are taking it and composting it.
Wow, one man's trash, huh?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Incredibly efficient, and he interviews some of these guys, and they are incredibly poor. Some of these farmers, and they are grinding and moistening and checking and just they are baby monitoring this compost pile of theirs because they fucking need it.
That's interesting.
They have to have it.
Right, like that's as much of farming as planting. Like sometimes I've noticed like my image of a thing is missing out. Like you know, when I think of someone who works with wood, I think of like measuring and cutting with a saw, right? But then another part of being someone who really knows what they're doing is like, oh, I also know how to sharpen my steel implements. Yeah. So, you know, it's like thinking of someone working with wood as being as much about sharpening their tools as it is about cutting a board, you know, like being a farmer is as much about babying your compost as it is about planting seeds and watering.
A good carpenter can maybe see the shape in the wood. You know, he understands the board by touching it and looking at it. You know, for these Chinese farmers, the most important part of their field is their compost pile in their courtyard that they're taking care of. It's really something, you know. They've been in some parts on the Yellow River Valley, they've probably pulled 6,000, 7,000 harvests off of that soil. In eastern Washington, 130, 150 maybe. 6,000, 7,000 versus 150, you know.
Without depleting it.
Without depleting it. How they do that? What they doing? How is that possible? And that's how they did it.
Once you hear it, it sort of makes you wonder why it's even a thing to hear. You know, why it'd be something you'd have to learn about or think about rather than the norm. Right. It's like being impressed with someone for breathing or something, you know. Yep.
For them. And so that's the product of being.
Well, the alternative is dying. So,
the alternative is being swept into the dustbin of history. Like, oh, look, they came and went. That's what you get. We're really suffering the consequences of being a successful colonial enterprise. That's what you get when you're a colonial frontier people. Well, just cut down more trees. There's always more. Just plow up more soil. There's going to be more. Well,
your skill set is
it doesn't take much to do that.
Yeah, suited to only one thing.
Yeah.
If you're only good at stealing or
stealing from the future.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't. You sit there. I don't need to bother with all this composting because I'll just go cut down more trees.
Find some more land.
Yeah. And I mean, so they're very lucky. That's why, I mean, in the sense, even today, like they're sitting there running rings around us economically and drawing their own water economically, so to speak. Like they look at how much they have transformed themselves economically in the face of foreign threats and pressures in the past 50 years. It's extraordinary. Part of the reason they can do that is because they have that inner way of looking. They look inward and say, how can we change ourselves in order to better ourselves and keep our civilization going? Whereas other civilizations can't even ask that question. Most notably ours.
I mean, how do you think the alternative to that question is? Like, what questions are we asking ourselves instead of that one?
Blaming outsiders for our inner problems. How can we be safe?
Right.
Most of the things we talk about with external things is about security. The endless security speak, you know. We don't have much time. There's no country more vulnerable to energy shortages and to any shortage than this one. Because we're the last bastion of European colonialism, and so we just we dare not look inward. Because then no matter what, you're looking at a real tough few decades, if not centuries.
Right.
Whereas
it's more comfortable to not have to.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it seemed so in the year, so the Romans went into Northern Europe and they took the Mediterranean plow with them. Wrong plow. It's the light scratch plow. It's basically an ARD, A-R-D, very old word. It doesn't do much more than scratch the surface.
Okay.
Which is what you need if you're farming in Sicily.
Okay.
Because you have a light soil and you don't want it to dry out. Well, the soil in northern France, north of the Alps, is deep and wet. So the light scratch plow doesn't do much, and the soil is too soggy. And they had a two-field system because they didn't fertilize. The Romans didn't fertilize their fields. Instead, they had a two-field system where half of the field is fallow.
Mm-hmm. So
that means out of 100% of your arable land, only 50% is in use any given year. Right? So after the empire collapses, that technology stays the same, Europe was actually at the low edge of. We talk about kicking the lid off of ecological limits. They were actually at the lower edge of the ecological limit. They probably couldn't have been less populated and still survive.
Right.
They were relying almost on natural mechanisms of like, well, there's so few of us and our agricultural yields are so low that natural systems are recharging the soil, you know, and we can't even cut the forest down hardly. It grows back so quickly.
Right.
The yields on their grain might have been 2-1 or 3-1 for wheat, which is incredibly low. Modern day yields are like 100-1. That means you have one grain to plant the next year and one grain to eat. But then several inventions happened. One of them was the heavy iron plow, which cut the soil deeply, flipped it, and dried it out.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was the padded horse, which is not. They did not invent them. It was brought in from outside. The other one is the padded horse collar, which means you can use horses now, which are twice as fast as oxen.
Oh.
Which really matters because you have a narrow window of opportunity to plant in the spring.
All that took was some cloth on a...
Well, it's not the easiest invention, but it does seem pretty obvious in hindsight. And there is the stirrup in there, but also you go to a 3-field system where one field is fallow, one is grain, and the other is like a root crop or something.
Okay.
So now only 1/3 of your land is non-productive. Then half, literally half. That is not efficient, you know. I think one reason the Romans kept with it is they just kind of threw slaves at the problem. We throw petroleum at our problems. They threw slaves at it.
Right.
You know. But so when those 3 inventions happened roughly around the year 1000. That's when they kind of become widespread.
The 3-field rotation, padded horse collar, and
the mold board, the heavy iron plow.
I
right?
see.
And the population doubles in Europe over the next 300 years until the Black Death, basically. That's an incredible difference. Like, your population is X, now it's 2X.
Right.
Because of 3 simple inventions.
Right.
That just simply, now we're going to farm like we should farm north of the Alps.
I always love too remembering that like ideas are technology.
Yes.
You know, you didn't inventing that the 3-field system.
It's
well,
not
it's not an object.
Yep.
Yeah. No one is tinkering in their lab and has something to yell, run out on the streets yelling "Eureka! Look at it!"
Yeah.
It's not a doodad.
Yeah.
It's just an idea.
Yeah. And then eventually you get, in like the 1600s, you get the 4-field system. What a shock.
Right.
And, you have a 4-field system? Guess what the Chinese have? An infinite field system. They're always using every single square inch of land that they possibly can.
Now, what was the function that the fallow field served?
To recharge soil nutrients.
Right.
Literally. Like, you could, if you grew wheat 2 years in a row, your harvest might tank.
Right.
And it tanked so badly, it probably wasn't worth it. So you have a plowed field. You plow a field, you plant wheat on it. The next year, you don't.
Right.
You plow the field next to it. I mean, they did not know. They were like, what do you mean we need all this animal manure?
Right.
Well, you don't.
They noticed what they couldn't do, but they didn't know really how to fix it.
Yeah, they liked having animal manure, and they liked having human excrement, because then they were like, it does grow the crops better. Cool. But they couldn't, in their mind, it's an idea, it's a technology. They didn't grow fodder crops for enough animals to break the cycle and always have enough manure to always have all their land under cultivation.
Right.
So they would graze animals on the fallow. That's another way to recharge it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If sheep and goats
are grazing,
they're pooping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Hence the like chicken tractor or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same notion.
Yeah.
But again, a hell of a lot less efficient than what the Chinese were doing at the exact same time. In the year 700, the Tang Dynasty is at its height. They are sending armies all the way to Afghanistan and the Aral Sea. They ruled this. Literally, the Son of Heaven was also the great Khan of the steppe, because they smashed the Eastern and Western Turks, the first big Turkish Khanates. Smashed them. Steppe nomads, by law, had to come to the imperial palace at Chagan and pay obeisance to a Chinese emperor. They were vassals.
Wow.
Incredible. The situation reversed. After that, the steppe nomads they got some inventions like the stirrup and good iron working and stuff that they were able to then conquer China for quite a while after that. So it matters. Ecological limits,
Right.
In the year 900, Paris might have had 5,000 people, and it was a big city, a really big city. Milan might have had 20,000. These are tiny towns. 20,000 people. Paris is 5,000 people. London is probably less than that. Whew.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
On a,
it would have been the
timeline.
It was after the Viking invasions, so I'm sure they probably had good walls and stuff, but it was. You just listen to the medieval stories and stuff. They all take place in these deep, dark forests. That's because what was there.
Right.
There were wolves that attacked people on the outskirts of Paris.
Right.
Even during the 100 Years' War. That was, 300 years later. Chagan was 2 million. 1 million on the inside the walls, and
then the rural.
Yeah, the suburbs.
Right.
Yeah. Incredible.
Unincorporated Chagan
On
County.
right. Yeah. The span away.
But no less important.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine that's where the food came from.
Partly, yeah. It couldn't feed itself. They had to bring it in. You know?
Right.
But I think they dug a canal. Like the Grand Canal goes north. Chagan's in kind of the east. It's modern day Xi'an, but
Okay.
so it's in
gotcha.
Shaanxi. But I think they dug a canal to food shipments from the south. Barges full of rice.
Ah.
Yeah, because it's a city of 2 million people and there's no engines.
Boats work.
Boats were where it's at.
I'd like to order some rice.
Yeah,
How much?
all of it.
All of it.
Yeah, I got 2 million mouths to feed.
Send it up the river.
Yeah,
Please.
the Tang Dynasty was cool. It was kind of the last flourishing of like the it was bureaucratic. Don't get me wrong, but it was the last huge flourishing of the aristocratic kind of the aristocratic beginnings of Chinese civilization. Like it was fairly warlike. It was incredibly dynamic, like beautiful art and architecture, but it had this kind of self-confidence, and it was still ruled by like the big families of nobility and stuff. There was an emperor, of course,
Right.
but the bureaucracy was staffed mostly by aristocrats. This is before the imperial exam system kind
Before
of
this.
democratized the bureaucracy.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And then there was a big rebellion, and they kind of, when they collapsed, those aristocratic families basically kind of wiped themselves out, fighting each other and all that. And so when the new dynasty came in, the Song, they didn't have enough, there weren't enough aristocrats left.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they opened it up. The imperial exam system became the main method, and it opened it up to everybody.
Neat.
Young men. All men.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so weird to think about. I mean, it seems so Chinese, the civil exams.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard. It's funny to think about a pre-civil exam.
Yeah. Yeah. But it did. There was, I mean, they had the exam, but it wasn't the most important. You know, it was still, the government was kind of some lower class people could make it in, but not many.
Right.
The imperial exam system is roughly around 1,000 when it becomes the main route, and then it's open technically to everybody.
Gotcha.
It's still mostly
It's mostly where,
rich
it's
and-
just, that's
But-
where you give that's where rich people get jobs.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's exactly right.
And you just, if you don't do anything else, you just end up in the central bureaucracy.
Yeah, but they were very coveted jobs. It wasn't like don't say you ended up. It's like you were happy to be in any amount of government job. Holy cow. If you weren't, what did you do? You were a farmer or a merchant.
Right.
But yeah, so the Tang was, the last, like it was so self-confident, and it was so beautiful, and it was so, they knew they were the center of the world, that there was a kind of almost serenity to it. That was when all those poets, the
Right.
Levi and Du Fu and them were there. No, they knew each other. They corresponded.
Is that, did it also have sort of a reputation for, well, it does, like you said, sort of what did you say? It was self-assured or?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem like these self-assured empires often are more sort of pluralistic and tolerant than the insecure empires.
Absolutely they were.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, you can be or think a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
We're secure enough in our own empirehood.
Exactly.
You know, I can wear pink. I'm secure enough in my empirehood.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were the only one who had a empress. The only reigning empress. You know, she was still Wu Di. It's a gender neutral term. So she was the emperor.
Right.
But she reigned in her own right even, and retired on her own and wasn't assassinated or anything. That's how self-confident they were.
She abdicated. And
Yeah, Wu Zetian. She was. Her son was kind of a wimpy boy, and I think she took it from him, and then he got it back when she was done.
When she was
had
done.
peace.
Yeah.
How fucking cool is that?
She's probably doing that as a favor to
A woman
everybody.
ruling over all these Confucian scholars who were like, something's very wrong in the palace, but that's incredible.
But also, yeah, it would be wrong once it's established. Then it's wrong to say it's wrong.
Yeah.
Also, because you can't. Because
she's the son of heaven.
Right.
Incredible. Absolutely. And they really patronized Buddhism, and envoys were coming in from Korea, Japan. They ruled the steppes. Envoys were coming. They ruled Vietnam at the time, northern Vietnam. So they ruled the Vietnamese, who were in what isn't today northern Vietnam.
I see.
They were getting
part
everybody.
of China then.
Yeah, and
Or the Chinese.
Yeah, they ruled the Vietnamese
Empire.
Yeah, exactly. They were getting envoys from basically everybody they knew, and we're like, yeah, bring them all. Chang'an is this enormous bustle. It's the biggest city in the world. It's bustling. It's accepting students.
I got to ride a tandem bicycle around the walls.
You mentioned
Yeah.
that. That is, I would tell me about that.
Some old, the old city walls or whatever. But
Xi'an, right?
yeah. That was fun.
God.
I don't remember it taking all that long, but they could have been
Yeah.
height walls.
Right.
I mean, pre-peak.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, it's so old that. Oh, these are from the 1700s.
Yeah, sometimes you start to kind of lose perspective.
Yeah. Which Rome? Which city
exactly.
of Rome? The Byzantine one or the,
yeah. I have a hard time keeping track of those things.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah, you got it. You kind of have.
What do you mean when you say Rome? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been to the city.
Yeah. Yep.
Or places that are now cities that share a name of things that used to be city-states.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which Athens?
Right.
I mean, we forget that one of the longest periods of peace and prosperity for Athens was in the Ottoman Empire. They did very well.
Well,
but the narrative we have of Western civ, it must have been oppressive. It must have been tyrannical.
Right.
Whatever.
Well, yeah.
Of course we're going to
had to have been. Yeah, because look at them. They're the enemy.
Right. Yeah.
And Athens are our pappies.
Yep.
Our grandpappies.
Right. And the question, which civilization did Athens do better under? The Ottomans or the Europeans? Because Germany was not very nice to Athens and Greece during World War II, and they were certainly European. And this austerity that we've crushed, Athens is in a shitty state today.
Right.
Because of capitalism. Like they made, I read this, it was just a horrible story to read, but after 2008, like the homelessness and the joblessness, unemployment is so bad that there was some forest, either close to the city limits or inside, that the Nazis cut down apparently. I don't know why, but the Greeks laboriously replanted it and took care of it, and now they're burning it down again because the poverty is so bad they don't have anything to cook their food with. And so, like the title
this was a symbolic forest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that's how bad our austerity is. Well, maybe they should rejoin the Ottomans because the Western Europe is not treating them very well. It's treating them like an internal colony. Like, we don't think you're credit worthy. What the fuck?
Right.
Am I a part of you or not? If I'm a part of you, then I'm credit worthy. Don't sit there and punish this subgroup. And they're taking the brunt of this refugee crisis caused by our empire and all that. You see, and oh God, I mean,
no one seems to care much either.
No, we're one step away from calling them swarthy Mediterranean. Just excluded. Like, what? They are more like Middle Easterners.
Right.
We're one step away from that. It's sickening.
Even as we
pay
lip service to our the roots of our Western, enlightened culture.
Yeah. Which shows you how false it is. Like an Ottoman sultan was far closer to a Western emperor than to a Roman emperor than any of these petty Germanic kingdoms to the west at its height. Suleiman was far closer to Constantine or to Justinian than Louis XIV.
Right. Constantine had a few campaigns under his belt. I don't know how many Louis XIV. And that's not a big difference, maybe. But
No, but I mean, Louis was no relative to a real. He was the Sun King, but he was no emperor. But yeah, and I mean, Greece is burning down because of climate change. The fires are getting really intense, and yeah, we're just sitting there paying lip service to this idea.
Yeah, it's kind of cute when it gets a little. It's like people generally don't appreciate the implications of the things they say they believe in.
Yep.
You know, like, well, if you're gonna use this rhetoric over here, like you were mentioning your conversation with your pig guy.
Oh yeah.
You know, so what do you think about this? You know, if you hold these things as feelings and opinions true, well then, how about this case over here?
Right. Right. And it shows you how. I mean, again, not to like that everything. You know, there's the left and right split, but especially the right wing of the United States right now and of America in general. Well, it shows you how false that narrative is, and just how it's just such a flimsy, shabby lie.
Right.
Because if it was true, we would be trying to help Greece. You know. Right.
Exactly. I'm regurgitating this from something I just recently listened to, but someone was making the point. You know, all these folks sort of crying. I don't know. Maybe crocodile tears is maybe appropriate. You know, worried about the well-being of the poor Venezuelans.
Oh God.
You know, but meanwhile,
right.
Yemen and Saudi Arabia, you know, it's like you're gonna pretend to be this benevolent, you know, bleeding heart for these folks and completely ignore, you know, genocide that we're sponsoring or supporting at least, facilitating.
Our hands are pretty bloody with that one.
Yeah.
And many others. Yeah, it's very obvious. Like once you're a Nazi, it's always a Nazi if you're in power, because you can't compromise, because you're a crook, you're a criminal. So once you're in power, the ratchet only spins one way. So in 2016, the house I bought, or 2017, that house I bought was under construction, and so I read a big long book in a lot of bars, and it was called The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich.
Josh, he's doing it again.
Oh,
just
no.
kidding.
The bragging.
Yeah. Hey, I'm just stating.
No. I read a big long book, and I've been to a lot of bars.
Oh, that was good.
Yeah,
that was well constructed, in fact.
He had a sub-brag.
I'm kind of jealous. That was perfect.
My God.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Not only am I intellectual, but I'm also relatable. Yeah. I'm salt of the earth.
Yeah, that's right. Have a beer with this guy.
Yeah.
Talk about Nazis.
The rise and fall of the Third Reich.
Yeah, the ratchet on it was really, it's interesting to watch, because even those guys, that gang of, I mean, they were pretty sorry, shabby lot, and even they were kind of, some of them were like, hey, can't we just be reasonable now? Like, we won.
Right.
Let's consolidate our victory, and you get to where it's just, well, no, you really can't, because you're a bunch of crooks, and if you lose a single battle, you're going to end up in prison or overthrown, and so they just could not stop once they started down that slope.
I see.
Like, it was just a suicide run, because they were like, oh my God, we have almost all of Eastern Europe, and we have France. Italy is an ally. Spain is an ally. We're sitting pretty, guys. Let's just stop. And you couldn't.
Huh? Can't get any less Nazi.
Yeah.
You got the tiger by the tail, and then the stakes just keep getting higher.
Yeah. And so, like, the way, I mean, they did not have to attack Russia, except for that, in that way, except for that ratchet, you know, the turn of that ratchet. But if they had waited just 2 years, 24 months, they probably would have been
home free.
Stalin wasn't planning to attack them. He had grabbed a nice chunk of territory with the partition of Poland and all that, and the Baltics and stuff. So and he didn't have to fire a shot to do it. So he was very happy with what had happened, you know. But they had to. They just had to do it. And the really funny parts are like moments of people giving them the benefit of the doubt who just really, they were kind of like the petty goodwill wishers, you know. The one guy who was like a Frenchman, or I think it was a German who was helping Goring loot the artwork of France. And he was very well intentioned, and he was very happy to see that these paintings were going to be shown in Berlin.
Oh, right.
And he's talking to Goring about like, well, we really should catalog this and make sure it's all, you know, nicely taken care of. And he's like, Goring's like, yeah, whatever. Just throw it in the train. Send it east. And he's like, but these are priceless artworks. It's like, you are a Nazi. You conquered France unjustly, you know, like, and you're sitting there, well,
I'll take that and that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that is a fine choice, sir.
Yeah.
Can I wrap that for you?
Nah, don't wrap it up. I don't really care.
Yeah.
And so for a moment, there was this glimmer of like, wait a minute. This guy is a monster.
Right.
And then he just got right back to work doing what his monster master told him. And it's like, you know, it's like that. Like, look at our foreign policy. Like, America has a lot to answer for, and it's not going to go away if we elect a Democrat in 2020. They remember around the world, and so at a certain point, that's why it's like, God, you talk to some of these people and they're like, well, we just need to nuke everybody. And they mean it.
Yeah.
Like my pig guy. He said, we need to just nuke them all. We just need to nuke them all in the Middle East. And I said, and Israel too? They're in the Middle East. You know, what about Saudi Arabia, Mike? Should we nuke Saudi Arabia?
Yes.
Or should we, you know, so. But they mean it. There's a real sincerity in that. Because it's like, no, we have the right to kill anybody we want in the world.
Especially if they bug us.
They say, you know, like it's stupid to compare the American empire to the Nazis because, number one, online, everybody gets compared to a Nazi. Number two, they worked hard. We don't. We fight really lazy genocides, you know. But probably what percentage of the world population, the global society that's being built, wants to help the environment, transition away from fossil fuels, spend less on the military, take care of the planet, get more health care for people? What, 80% of the world, do you think, wants that? 90? And who's standing in the way? Washington, D.C. That's it. We are the...
So much nuke us when you put it that way.
It is Washington, D.C.,
That's
much
it.
more than it's the United States of
Yes,
America.
yeah,
though.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's this monstrous cancer that's sitting there like, yeah, we should probably transition from fossil fuels, but in the meantime, let's destroy Libya and spark a war with Iran and all, just like insane. It's all on the surface now.
It's like someone's bored. I don't know.
They don't know what else to do. They themselves are trapped by it. They probably, maybe some of them are sincere, but some of them are probably like, well, I just haven't thought about it that much. We can't not be antagonistic towards Iran. That would jeopardize my career. We've been doing that for so long. We can't change it.
Right. My entire job depends on antagonizing.
Yeah.
I think that's a really like accurate portrayal. Like it's short-sighted for one thing in like the planetary sense, like, oh, you're burning all these fossil fuels and that's going to doom people, you know, a couple decades down the line. But it's also short-sighted because they're purely thinking about their own careers too. It's not even like, well, people 40 years down the road, whatever. But it's not, it's like my career, not even this bigger picture, just me and the people that I want to also be rich.
That trial I sat on where I was the jury, I was the substitute jury guy for, they were these dead-eyed, dead-souled reptiles, just like they had their son testify about something. And he just listed off in this very banal way, like all the places he'd been, and he's like, yeah, I was in Yemen and stuff like that. I'm looking around the room like, what the fuck is going on? Who are these people? They were these rich courtiers, they were flies around the festering shit pile of Washington, D.C., like he worked for the State Department in Yemen. Oh, so you're evil. You're an evil person. Yes. And he was when he was testifying, he was like at the gym and he had his earbuds in him. Like, wow. The banality of evil. The average German was like, Germany has been an important part of Europe for 1,000 years. How could we be that evil? While the Holocaust is going on. While they were working there, they were going, well, here we are at the heart of the empire, bombing the fuck out of everybody that we can. And you still have to live your life. Oh, sucks. It's just this constant gnawing. It's like being planed away for me,
Sanded.
Yeah. Just ground down.
Micron by micron.
Yeah. Some of my rage is still there, but the exhaustion, I never knew I could feel this exhausted. But the arc of history does bend towards justice, and we are very wrong. We're like...
Is that consolation for you?
It is, yeah. We talked about the Assyrians. They paid for it. Everybody does eventually pay for it. Even if they think they don't, It's an embarrassment to be an American. You have to work really hard to be proud of it. Like it's hard to look in the mirror and be this hate,
I don't know. I think it looks pretty easy to a lot of folks out there.
Yeah, true. But it's all they have is their hate. That's it, And what's cool to think about is that for them, hearing somebody speak Spanish is torture.
Although that guy was at the taco truck wearing a Just Stand t-shirt.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable.
Dude, yeah. One football player kneels during a song.
And someone gets to sell t-shirts on it.
Yeah.
If we were clever enough, we could have got in on the merch game.
Yeah.
Dang. Just stand. Just let money lying on the table.
Yeah.
And let someone else pick it up with that one. Jeez.
They're all grifters,
Yeah.
It's so cool. I read Kurt Schlichter every now and then. And he ends every article with a "please buy my book, guys" paragraph. I write about this in my thing, New Dawn or whatever, or Red State, Blue State. He wrote this shitty series. Chapo told me about it, but hilarious. Every fucking article. I'm not exaggerating. It's so funny.
That's almost
like if you read three of them in a row, you're like, wait a minute. This has a familiar coda.
Right.
Do they just not... If somebody reads that in seriousness, do they just not remember? Whew. Cognitive dissonance.
Sometimes I wonder why people aren't as vain as I am. Like, I'd be too vain to look petty or, there's certain choices people make that it's like, I almost respect it that you're doing that because you want to and not... But not being self-conscious about it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I guess I have a different idea of like gauche or something than some folks.
Yeah. Well, and we're already in a way like not welcome in the presence of, not welcome in society. Like adults. It's very bad when adults get shunned. Right. That's about as bad as it gets. When it's like, you're not welcome here in polite society anymore. Hopefully we... It already seems like, like you check the People's Daily and stuff, and they just had their, second big Belt and Road Initiative forum, Like, the Tang Dynasty is back. That's what this Belt and Road Initiative is. 100, it's like 116 countries went. And what are they talking about? Environmental protection, social justice, poverty reduction, all this other stuff. So we might have simply not got the memo. Like, oh, wait a minute. 3 billion people in the Eurasian heartland, Afro-Asian heartland, are rising up in dignity and grace.
You're almost making me optimistic.
Right? The Belt and Road Initiative is worth looking into. It's incredible. They're they're running a tight ship. They're being very careful, which gives me peace at night when we're sending aircraft carriers into the Persian Gulf.
What's our country's initiative? There's no plan to benefit the populace whatsoever.
Nope. A brutal aristocratic empire,
Yeah. But part of that you would think would be, you're threatening and exploiting people elsewhere to make life for those within comfortable, so they accept the cost of their comfort. But when you just continue ratcheting down on everybody,
your own people too. Yeah, you'd think.
Yeah, it's like jingoism without the good parts.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. It's only the most blind psychos who are the ones waving the flag. I think it's
good. At least the Athenian Empire was brutal, but it was a democracy, and the average person understood that we do need to go out there and kill and enslave a lot of fellow Greeks to keep the tribute coming.
Right.
And to keep the grain shipments coming.
Right.
I've tried to understand the economy, and I think it's kind of an idiot. The wealth is not flowing into the tribute isn't coming in, even now, to the United States. I really think that. So we're not talking history now. We're talking about, it's the nature of the flows of wealth around the world, to the best of my knowledge, right? Which, that's opaque by its very nature.
Okay.
You can't even understand something like that. But I have a hunch. It feels like real wealth is actually flowing out of the United States, and that we ourselves, our propaganda machine is so perfect that we don't even know it's happening. It's like that crucial moment when maybe a few German generals realized that they were not going to win on the Eastern Front, kind of thing. And all of a sudden, the question at hand was not about a German victory, it was what a Russian victory was going to look like. So you could say the same exact thing about Napoleon. There is just that one oh, wait a minute, oh my God, we're all the way out here. Seems like it's a big success, but we're actually hollow.
Right.
And
I was getting that image, that hollowness, there's insides being sucked out.
Yeah.
And ending up with a husk that bears a passing resemblance, so that you don't know to be alarmed yet or something.
Yeah. And eventually you're going to go, wait a minute, not only can we not win, we can't even retreat. Sometimes it's a very good thing to retreat. Sometimes a strategic retreat is the closest thing you're going to get to victory. So you look at the United States, and you look at the poverty, and you look at the divisions and all that, and look at the fact that neither Russia nor China nor India feel, none of those countries are acting as if they feel truly threatened. We're not threatening any of their core interests. And I think it's because the real wealth is flowing out of the United States.
When you talk about the real wealth, is this a good, a few weeks back, or the last time we did this, or second, we talked about sort of which way the arrow's pointing. Is that the same arrow you're talking about?
Yeah,
the arrow of the grain in a certain time and place in history? Yeah.
It is. It really is.
Because it's not still grain entirely, is it?
Right. So,
despite the first part of our conversation, which was very food centric,
right? Which because the grain was the energy of its day.
Right.
Because it was a solar powered world. Now it's fossil fuels. So
I see.
So, how much time do we have left? Okay. So
It's hour 05.
Okay. Well, I'll try to end on this then, because the day is what day is it? The May 11th.
Today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. 2019. So every natural gas field in the United States except one, the Permian Basin, is in decline, and all of our regular oil wells are in decline.
What do you mean decline? Aren't they aren't they in decline as soon as you pop the lid?
No.
I don't.
No. You can develop an oil field and it's producing 1 million barrels, and then 3 years later it's producing 20 million barrels a day.
Right. Okay. So they have a curve.
Yeah, they do. They have it's the Hubbard curve. It's the curve. All of them go through it. Some quicker than others.
I see.
So one fracking well, one. If you want to frack one well, it costs about $10 million. And maybe after 5 months, that fracked well, because of the nature of shale oil, the geologic, non-negotiable geologic reality of what a shale oil well is, it might only be producing 500 barrels a day at $60 a barrel in less than a year. You won't even pay off the $10 million just to frack the fucking thing, let alone maintain it. So other countries, most notably Russia, but Iran and Iraq also have, and Qatar, have natural gas and oil wells, resources in the ground, hydrocarbon resources that can be produced vastly cheaper than our own, right? Vastly.
So you're saying pretty much simply we're a buyer, not a seller.
Yeah, that is the central reason why the energy is flowing out of the United States instead of the other way around, than the wealth flowing from the world into the United States, because energy is a leverage on labor. Energy in fossil fuels or coal or electricity leverages your labor massively. You can only lift a couple 100-pound sacks of potatoes a day, but if you're driving a forklift for the same wages, you can do 500 times more work, right? Mm-hmm. And so the slope of energy in the United States is against us now, and it's in their favor. It's like pushing water uphill. You now have to work. If the water's flowing downhill, you can put a water wheel on it, and that thing can turn and turn and turn, and you can harvest energy from that water flow, that energy flow. Mm-hmm. If you have to push it uphill, you have to get the energy from some other source. As long as their hydrocarbons are less expensive than our own, their hydrocarbons are now harvesting our wealth. They're drinking our milkshake. And that's what's going on right now. And so that's what you're going to see: inflation.
Now, does my labor become more valuable as the energy gets more expensive?
It becomes less valuable, Luke.
But if they have less of the thing that helps me do 500 things instead of one thing,
they have more oil.
Then they need more of me.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Do you see? It's difficult to see. It took me a long time.
They need more of me to get the same amount done. So
yes, and people are expensive, and machines, you can turn them off at night. So we drained our cheap oil too soon. We did it too soon. We did it first. We were an oil exporter until I think 1960, which is also the year that new discoveries of oil in the ground, not production, discoveries. Mm-hmm. See the difference? Peaked for the planet Earth in 1960. And regular light sweet crude in the United States peaked in 1970. That was before Prudhoe Bay. But even Prudhoe Bay didn't completely reverse it. The golden age of the American empire, that was then. That was those decades. Because our oil was so cheap, we could send, but we controlled our own labor. We controlled enough of our own oil and enough of our own labor so we could send out our money and our labor and harvest what was worth harvesting from other parts of the world, right? Now I mean, the fracking boom is that noise when you're at the bottom of the straw, you know, like the sound you're not supposed to make at a restaurant. That is what it is. It is literally unraveling right now. I read the Wall Street Journal, the front pages, and like Chevron just tried to acquire Anadarko, and I'm like, and these other fracking places, because the fracking boom is over. And it's like, oh, did they give you a good deal? Man, how kind of them. How generous of these fracking companies to sell you what they have for such a good, what a bargain. My God, Chevron, you're getting a bargain.
It's like getting.
Oh my fucking God!
It's like getting a good deal on an 8-track player after they start making cassettes.
Oh my God! Yeah. Buy your VHSs today. Pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
Oh my God! It's happening. And so worldwide, if you're Russia or you're Iran, you're going, wait a minute. Wait. As long as capital flows are relatively open, we can buy anything that's actually worth buying with our money backed up by our energy resources for actual pennies on the dollar, for stuff that's actually worth getting. Not a fracking company. Russia doesn't need to bid for a fracking company. Intellectual property, any companies that actually are worth something, some tech companies, things like that. So the real wealth is flowing out. Our small towns are withering and dying. Our politics are more divisive. And so that's what I mean when I say I have this hunch. You don't want Russia to actually feel threatened in its vital national interests, or China for that matter. And if we actually did threaten them, they would be behaving very differently.
Don't want to poke the bear.
Don't poke the bear.
Or the
don't
tiger.
wake the dragon.
Yeah.
Or even the panda. So, because they're like, oh, wait a minute. As long as the communists continue to control the central government, they're fine. They're fine. There's more, the top 2 provinces, I think, the top 3 provinces have more population than the U.S. We do not threaten them in any way. We can't nuke them. They'll nuke us back. So it's a hunch, on my part, because you can't figure this out until well after the fact. But we're not about to embark on another major war or another major national revival. And if we tried, they would stop us. They would just tank our debt. They would blow apart our budget, Another recession is coming, a bad one. And it's going to really, really hurt us because we have farther to fall. You could say the past 10 years have been them getting their money out. And we feel it. Like the average American feels that their standard of living is just getting worse and worse. That fucking grind. The thing that funded the one guy, Art Berman, he really knows America. He really knows. He has a mental map of all the world's oil and natural gas fields in his head. And it's a 3-dimensional one. Not only where they are, but their production history. And not only how much is in there, but their production history. He calls the fracking boom a Ponzi scheme. What funded it? Where did the money come from? Our pensions. All our retirements. It wasn't the housing, the housing bubble burst, and then all that debt needed to be fed more. And it came mostly from pensions and
Fun stuff.
May you live in interesting times. The fracking boom is ending right now, and they are liquidating their position. It's the funniest fucking thing in the world. Why would Chevron want to buy a fracking field?
Seems pretty short-sighted.
Whew.
Although
the production curves on an average frac are incredibly short. They spike very high and then they tank just as quickly. So in 1 year, they might produce at their peak 200,000 barrels a day, but that's because you're sucking up the only stuff that's there. It's gone in a few months. So they cover for it. It's a Fourier transform. They cover it. It looks like overall that in aggregate, it looks like our production goes up very much, but it's a bunch of incredibly small, tiny little spikelets. See,
Right.
But they all average up when you just draw the line over the top of the curve, and you draw that smooth line, and you go, oh, this is like other smooth lines. No, it isn't. It is not like those other smooth lines. Those other smooth lines might be 5 major oil fields that together produce 20 million barrels a day. Not 50,000 individual tiny little wells.
It reminds me of like me trying to play like a Euro board game, you know, with like very complex resource management.
Yeah.
But I'm
Settlers
no good at it. Oh, well, Settlers of Catan would be like your entry level.
Oh,
but
sure,
anyway,
Sorry.
you know, like you try to build this machine, but then when it doesn't work, you're just like scrambling, but you're like bleeding resources in these little ventures to like go blip, but you know the arrow, you know the plane's gonna crash.
Yeah.
You know, lighting.
Yep.
You know, throwing a suitcase into the boiler or whatever is only gonna get you this much altitude.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sort of mixing imagery.
There's
a great.
That's not a bad way to think about it.
It's a great Marx Brothers skit where they're racing they're in a train and they're trying to race a carriage to a nearby town, and Harpo and Chico start just chopping up the train cars,
the furniture,
the whole boxes and everything. Anyway, it's a great gag, but it's
that's
like
not a bad
it's
metaphor at all.
desperately trying to keep the, your head above water or the plane above, from a little longer from hitting the ground. But it's like we know where this goes. We're all out of gas.
Yeah, and honest to God, all the more power to them. The collapse is gonna be there no matter what. So that's how I am living my day-to-day life. I drive around and I look at America die. Good, cool, that's awesome, because I was there. I was there when industrial civilization ground to a halt. I watched it happen. Amazing. Most people never get that privilege. If you were an ancient Egyptian, you could pick any slice out of 6,000 years, and the day-to-day pattern of life would be the same. The same. Oh, what'd you do today, Hotep? Oh, mud brick. Got the grain. Sunburn. We are living through incredible times. Oh my God, I'm not keeping up, but yeah.